It's time for Fully Threaded Radio.
It is Fully Threaded Radio, voice of the FCH Sourcing Network. This is Eric Dudas, and I'm joined, as always, by the co-host of Fully Threaded. He's the designer of the industry-renowned software, The Scrubber, and also a guy who really digs fasteners, Mr. Brian Musker. Brian, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. I always have thought that The Scrubber sort of makes it sound a little bit too ordinary, and it's definitely not ordinary.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but it does what it says and it says what it does, and the industry certainly does know the Scrubber these days. Hey, it's episode number 11, everybody, and we sure do thank you for joining us. It's going to be another excellent episode, and this one will be uploaded to the fullythreaded.com website on September 9th, 2010. Here's the lineup for today's show. We're going to talk with the general manager of Jay-Cee Sales and Rivet. They're based out of Farmington, Michigan, and the general manager there is Allan Weitzman. He'll be joining us. We're going to talk a little bit about their website, rivetsinstock.com, and also what's been going on in the rivet side of the fastener world in general these days. We'll also be talking with Chris Donnell. He's a manager for Scanwell Logistics, and he's going to kind of give us some insights into what's been going on with transoceanic shipments from China, of course, and other Asian locations. But he'll have many comments on that subject that I think fully threaded listeners are going to find interesting. We'll get things kicked off with comments from our industry analyst, Mr. Holden Lewis. He's with BB&T Capital Markets, of course, and he joins us periodically. It's going to be a great show. Before we get too far into things, though, let's make a couple of comments about episode number 10, our last episode. I think we need to revisit two things really quickly. One of our guests was Mike McNulty, editor of Fastener Technology International magazine, and he emailed me, and we made a little bit of a boo-boo, and he wanted me to make sure that we got things kicked off there. Fastener Tech 11, which is the trade show we were discussing on last episode, the correct dates are June 13th through the 15th, 2011. Somehow we managed to get that at one day off.
Okay.
The guest from our other main segment during the last episode was Dr. Tony Lusher of Ohio State University. And on several occasions I refer to him as Tony Lusher. And we want to make sure to apologize and say it's Dr. Tony Lusher.
Yes, I wouldn't mind making a comment about that too. And it's Tony is such an easy person to talk to. You end up talking to him and referring to him as Tony. In fact, like any medical doctor, he's earned the title of Dr. Lusher, and we should have referred to him as that.
Well, he is not a medical doctor.
No, but he's earned his title of a doctor just like any one of them has. He's a doctor of engineering, which is a very difficult degree.
Well, that's a fair comment, and our policy here at Fully Threaded is we like to let everybody get all the respect they're entitled to. Hey, we're the guys who bring you fastenersclearinghouse.com and the FCH Sourcing Network, which currently contains over 500,000 line items of inventory, and I hope your team is out there using it to search and source whenever the need arises. It's a free resource for you, and you can access it at the website www.fastenersclearinghouse.com. We're always working to keep the database up to date and to keep it useful and adding new features. What's been happening lately, Brian? What have you been working on?
Well, I've been working really on a few improvements to, I guess, the Scrubber and all the logic behind it to deal with our new categories of inserts. And in fact, one of our guests, Allan Weitzman, is one of the people who led us off into introducing this whole new category.
Right, I know we talked a little bit about that during our conversation, and actually we mentioned this in episode 10 as well. I know that is an ongoing effort, and these things do take time, don't they? It's not something that just happens overnight in many cases.
Well, and we also have to be careful, because we are so widespread on the search engines that we have to make sure that if we make a change that the old way of referring to something still produces results. Otherwise, Google and Bing and things get upset. And our users would too.
Right. Well, I think people have an appreciation, at least a growing appreciation, for what it takes to achieve those kinds of search engine rankings, and that was one of the reasons we wanted to have Allan on the show. They've done such an excellent job with the rivetsinstock.com website, and it's not by accident, is it?
No. Well, he knows, he's been through the things that we went through in our early days. He did it a little earlier than us, but it's one of these states where you suddenly sit back and think, oh, my God, we really have to make sure that we get really, really well recognized on Google, or we're going to be paying someone a heap of money to keep being found. And by really careful design, you can achieve a similar thing as we have done and he's done. And he points to a number of really interesting things. We've all found the same things through our own experiments. But basically, you have to keep content fresh, you've got to keep it relevant, you've got to keep increasing it, and all those things are really critical. That's what he's been doing, and so have we. Right.
It would be nice if you could say one day that you could get away from paying a little bit here and there to kind of salt the earth, so to speak, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. So let's just leave it at where we can say that we do the best that we can by balancing those two things.
That's right, and keeping ahead of Google and Bing is a tough job because they don't really explain things very well, and Google announced a change to their master search engine today and implemented it, and you'll see that as you start typing words, Google starts beginning to suggest possible follow-on words.
Interesting.
This is based on the experimenting they did with the interface for the iPhone, actually.
Well, one of the things that is a tried and true method of keeping and building your Google ranking is to have good quality inbound links. And many thanks to the websites that have helped us all along the way, and especially with Fully Threaded Radio now out. And one of those sites is screwcrew.com, run by our friend Andy Pells. And I was actually out at his site. He redesigned it recently. And
I saw that.
I don't know if you saw one of these pages that he had, a post from a couple of weeks back. It was kind of funny. It was called You Might Be a Fastener Freak. And it was back from actually later in August. And one of the ones I really got a kick out of was about midway down this list he's got, and it says, when you're in a stadium seat and you look down at the ground, you don't care so much about the beer and soft drinks. You just think to yourself, wow, 4 anchor bolts on this seat times 50,000. Nice.
Right. That's right. Well, it's a little bit like the world I used to be in of sprinklers. Whenever you walked into a building, the first thing you did after 20 years in the company was look up to the roof to see what sort of sprinklers they had in the building.
Well, there are several others. You might be a fastener freak if, and
right, I read through that too.
Lots of other news out there in the fastener world since the last episode with some of our friends. Of course, our good friend Rob Lucas of Fidelis Fasteners made an announcement.
Yes, I heard that too.
This was covered on several of the news sites, including Global Fastener News and, of course, Fastener News Now. And he has taken the reins over at Fidelis and also opened another business entity known as Global Fastener Network, and that will be with partnership of Mr. Mike McGuire.
Well, anything that Rob's involved in, we'll be watching really carefully to see what happens.
Yeah, and I think a little better than that, actually. I talked to him a couple of days ago, and we're going to have him on the next episode of Fully Threaded, and he's going to let us know some of the details that have yet to be explained. And boy, I'm looking forward to hearing those. I really didn't see any of this coming.
Oh, yeah, cool. Good.
Now, speaking of Fastener News Now, I noticed Mike added a cool new feature to that, and it's called 60 Seconds. And I think really what it is kind of a reason to create a daily blurb on the Fastener News Now site. It's pretty neat.
Okay, yeah, as we know that's the sort of thing that Google loves, so it'll bump them up in the rankings a bit.
Yeah, and it's interesting to read, I hope.
Yeah, oh yeah.
At least the first couple have been.
Yeah.
Also, we got word today from the NFDA, and actually Jim Derry, NFDA president, sent a note out that we've got a new executive director of the association, and his name is Mark Leonard. I guess we'll be meeting him at next week's NFDA fall meeting in Chicago. That's September 14th and 15th.
Actually, I look forward to meeting a number of the people that we've talked to over the last few months there.
Yeah, that's right. And I'll try and get Mark on the show pretty soon and see what his direction's going to be and all the details surrounding his new position with the association. Now, we've continued to talk with various NFDA members since the last episode. Of course, as we mentioned, we've been bringing NFDA people into the network, and that's been really a very, very positive thing for the network, and we've got a lot of good feedback on it so far, too.
We've actually had some interesting feedback on fully threaded radio, too, or should I say about fully threaded radio, because we now know that people put fully threaded radio on and go out and do the gardening or do the lawns. Okay?
That's right, yeah.
Or they sit in their office in the weekend and do work and keep the podcast running.
That's right. The world of on-demand media, folks, is a beautiful thing.
That's right.
And speaking of communicating, we look forward to hearing from you anytime, and you can always feedback to us at the email address ftr@fullythreaded.com. Please let us know what you think.
Yeah, don't be bashful, don't be shy. We're happy and look forward to receiving any of your comments. And if you have any ideas and comments, please let us know.
Right. Just because we enjoy hearing them doesn't mean that we're saying we won't ignore some of them.
That's true. I didn't say we would act on all of them. I just said we would be really keen to hear all of them. Okay?
And with that, why don't we get this fastener fandango off the ground? We've got a great show, and there's a lot of content in this episode.
Right.
Holden Lewis is an analyst for BB&T Capital Markets. He's joining us now from their headquarters in Richmond, Virginia. Holden, welcome back to Fully Threaded.
Eric, thank you for having me again.
It's been a while since we talked, and I believe it was second quarter earnings time. There's a lot to discuss, and what are you seeing out there in the industrial manufacturing distribution landscape?
Well, the good news is that we haven't seen much different in terms of how the metrics that we track are playing out. Now, certainly it doesn't feel that way. From my seat here, tracking the stocks and tracking the sentiment, there has definitely been a more negative attitude surrounding the broader economy and the industrial economy as well, and that's had some adverse impact on the stocks and certainly the stock market. But in terms of the data that we track, there really has been no backing up that we would note of any relevance. And to give you an example, the metric that I think is most important, the industrial production metric, in July, which is the most recent data point, that was up another 0.8% sequentially, the 13th straight month that we have seen industrial production going up. And so that is really the metric that my companies, my manufacturers, and my distributors tend to track most closely to. And again, we're on a pretty solid streak of improvement from the trough that was set in July of 2009. So no backing up on the industrial production. The leading indicator that we talk about, the ISM's Purchasing Managers Index, the PMI, they release that every month. Any reading over 50 is positive, under 50 is negative. That has been north of 50 now since, again, July of 2009. And I think that investors were really looking for that to come down in August, even possibly below 50, and that's where the sentiment was. And in truth, July was 55.5, and August was 56.3. So I'll tell you, Eric, I still expect that this is a measure that's going to come down between 52 and 55 because that's always where this measure ultimately gets to as the economy ages. But, having increased in August was certainly a pleasant surprise for most, and it really continues to highlight what most companies in the wake of second quarter are telling us, which is that end market demand continues to be fairly good. That's certainly true in North America. Frankly, Europe, I think, has surprised everybody. Led by Germany, they're continuing to see strength. And in the wake of the Greek issues, I think that has really surprised a lot of different people. So at this point, if I were to pick out a negative, I would say that orders growth seems to be slowing a touch more than the production growth is. And, of course, orders is the leading metric. But it's still positive. It's had a very good run and can be a volatile index. And strip that out, and I think one is very hard-pressed to find anything negative in the industrial economy at this time. prices are stable, production is correcting, correcting upwards, I should say, and the environment, I think, is still relatively favorable as it relates to the upcoming Q3 earnings season. If there's anything that one could look at and say, yeah, but, it's the fact that visibility is not great, and I'm sure your listeners know that as well, certainly on the distribution side for fasteners. Visibility just is not great, and while I think that Q3 looks pretty solid, a skeptic could certainly say, yeah, but what about Q4 and Q1? Because the data points really don't extend that far. But right now, people should be continuing to see some pretty healthy business measures.
That's interesting stuff. And indeed, looking back to quarter two, there was an article that you and I discussed very briefly earlier this week from Global Fastener News, and it was touching on Fastenal's Q2 performance. Apparently they had some increased sales for the quarter. But there was a comment by CEO Will Oberton that we discussed, and maybe you can give your comments to this. He was mentioning that they're very optimistic that inventories really aren't going to be rebuilt in the future, and of course that's very good news for Fastenal, but you have some slightly different opinions on that subject.
Well, I do, and this is perhaps one of those debates that it's going to be 5 years down the road before we know who would be more accurate, but certainly Fastenal is coming at it from a point of view that conditions are relatively good for them. It's part market, but certainly, part what Fastenal does, which is, in some respects, provide a source of inventory for users of their products. And again, that is going well. I don't know if your listeners saw, but today, this morning, Fastenal actually released their monthly revenues for August, and those monthly revenues were up about 22% year over year, and they were up 3.5% over July of 2010. Those are both very good numbers. So just be aware that here's one fastener distributor that has continued to see some pretty good momentum in their top line at this point. And as you alluded to, one of the things that they're crediting it to, that Will was crediting it to, was just people aren't keeping inventory. If they need something, they don't have it on the shelves, they're going to the distributor. And I don't dispute that that's taking place, because I think confidence in the economy right now is still relatively shaky. People know what they're seeing, but I think you alluded to this earlier, but they're not necessarily fully buying into it. And as a result, I have no doubt that Fastenal, all the distributors at this point, really aren't seeing a ton of inventory build at their customers. The question, though, is whether or not that's permanent. Now, I'll say this. It seems like after every cycle, we hear two things pretty consistently from distributors. One is that they're going to become more the repository of inventory for their customers than they have in the past. And then the second thing that we hear, which you didn't bring up, but I'll throw out there, is that in this cycle, we're going to be able to consolidate our industry at a faster clip than we've done before. And I guess where my skepticism comes is, as I said, I've heard both of these things at this point in just about every cycle that we've been covering the space. And in general, I do think that manufacturers ask distributors to do more and more every year and every decade than they did in the years and decades prior. I do think that distributors are benefiting from scale and IT and things of that sort in such a way that they're gaining market share. But I'm not sure that we've necessarily seen a paradigm shift here where OEMs are going to view inventories materially different from how they have in the past, or where you're going to see a rapid consolidation of distribution. I think that if the economy normalizes and people become confident in the growth, they're going to add inventories, because I don't think there's a distributor or a manufacturer out there that wants to be left without product when it's demanded. So they're gonna pick some of that up. But in the current sentiment, I will say I think that it's somewhat of a moot point, because until and unless people start to feel confident in the economy, and right now there's a lot of skepticism, we may still very well be operating on a shoestring.
That's true, and we're seeing evidence of that every day with Fasteners Clearinghouse, I can tell you that.
So I guess the real question, Eric, is maybe what's really changed is, can anybody ever feel confident in the economy again? I guess that's what we'll have to test over time.
Let's turn the subject now to employment. As we talk anecdotally with distributors throughout the industry, we hear of increased activity and choppy activity. And at the same time, we really don't hear a lot about employment expanding. What are you seeing, in particular with fasteners, although I know you're covering kind of a broader slice of the industry? If you can, try and zero in as much as possible to help our smaller fastener distributors understand what's going on right now.
Sure. Well, yeah, and I'll address sort of the broader industrial employment, and then I'll touch on distributors specifically because I think that is a little bit different. The broader employment picture, I would say, is in the short term, certainly improved over what it was a year ago. We have clearly seen people bringing workers back. We have clearly seen the number of hours worked increase over the last 6 months, let's say. So, what we are seeing is that manufacturers' activity levels are such that hours and positions are being reinstalled, and we're seeing that. Now, we do have to bear in mind, though, that plant utilization is still down in the low 70%. So it's not like there's an enormous amount of capacity, or there's not like there's a tightness of capacity, which would make adding a lot of new bodies make sense. We're just not there at this point in the recovery. And so, the ads are very opportunistic in nature, but I'm not hearing much in the way of any anecdotes at this point about layoffs, short time. That's just not the environment we're in. And I think at this point, with every uptick that we get in industrial production, there is an incremental labor component that's going to be had. And that's really the environment that we've been in for the past 6 to 9 months, I think, is the environment that we continue to be in. So I don't anticipate a robust labor environment in the manufacturing and industrial sector, but certainly labor levels have stabilized, and if they have anywhere to go, it's more likely up, but it's on the margin. Another point I think I would make about labor, and this is more of a longer-term point, is I think that the idea that labor has been lost to, say, Chinese sourcing and things of that sort, I think that's actually overplayed. I think that the number one negative to employment and labor in the industrial space is simply productivity. Industrial companies have been very proficient in the last several decades in using technology to make products with less and less labor input. And so I think that is something which, from a purely economic standpoint, isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's something that continues. And I would argue that I heard my first anecdote from a company called Baldor Electric. They manufacture motors, that they really are more inclined looking ahead to aggressively invest in capital goods and equipment rather than personnel. And without getting into a political discussion or judgment, it's because they are concerned about what the costs of labor are going to be going forward. And so, long term, I think that there is still pressure on the labor force in the industrial world. That pressure is not going to ease up, but from a cyclical standpoint, it's not great right now, but it's certainly better than it was, and any improvements at the margin should continue to be in favor of labor, given what we're seeing out of industrial production. Now, talking about distributors specifically, what I think is interesting is, in Fastenal's case, this month we saw them add a fair number of new employees to their sales force, as well as presumably to their support staff. They've added, or will have added, I think, several hundred new employees over the course of this quarter. And what you're seeing, not only out of Fastenal, but I think you're also seeing it out of MSC, Grainger, as well as other distributors, is distributors are back in growth driver investment mode. All three of those big distributors, and other distributors as well, believe that their markets are fragmented, that they can gain market share, and they're in the process where they're going to be adding personnel, they're going to be adding mailings, they're going to be adding stores, all those things that they think, the bigger distributors think, can contribute to their continuing to gain market share over time. You're seeing them now get back into those growth driver modes. And so I think that the outlook for distribution hiring is probably not as bad as it is for the broader industrial space as a whole when you sort of take it out over any period of time. But you're definitely seeing distributors like Fastenal, Grainger, and MSC back in hiring mode as they pursue market share in the distribution world.
I'll take this opportunity to remind Fully Threaded listeners that they can receive Holden's weekly manufacturing review, which is a newsletter that he puts out along with several of his associates. And it's an excellent digest of the week in review. There's several metrics that he tracks and shares, and go to the fullythreaded.com website and you can subscribe. We'd be happy to send that off to you. Holden, we really appreciate your perspectives as usual, and thanks so much for joining us.
Eric, as always, I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to speaking to you next time.
Coming up next, Allan Weitzman of Jay-Cee Sales.
fastener-related.com. Search and source from over 500,000 line items, all just a mouse click away and available at no charge. When the need arises, you won't find a better place to locate hard-to-find fastener inventory. It's where you need to be.
This is Joe Truckee of Cal Fasteners, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for us.
This is Robert Wanzer, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for American Imperial.
This is Andy Pell from ScrewCrew.com, and FTH works for the fastener industry.
Join the sourcing network now and show your inventory to a whole new market. Turn slow movers into cash. List up to 10,000 line items. Show them to distributors only or to the world. FastenersClearinghouse.com. It's where you need to be.
Hi, this is Hugh Hewitt for the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund, www.semperfifund.org. Over the past 7 years, twice a year, the wonderful people who operate the Semper Fi Fund and many amazing Marines who have been the beneficiaries of the charities that have supported the Semper Fi Fund, including many thousands of individual donors, have come into my radio studio to tell their amazing stories of serving their country, of being wounded, and how the Semper Fi Fund has helped them make that transition back to recovery. Unfortunately, Bethesda and Walter Reed are full again. More and more men and women are coming back from the war injured, sometimes awfully so. We need the Semper Fi Fund to be there for these Marines and those soldiers, sailors, and airmen who served alongside of them. Please consider a gift to the Semper Fi Fund. Very low overhead, extraordinary capacity to get money where it needs to get in a hurry, and great management, including some of the senior Marines who've ever served under the flag. When you're looking for something to do that will make an impact, please check out the Semper Fi Fund. That's www.semperfifund.org, www.semperfifund.org.
This is Tracy Lumia of Distributors Link Magazine, the #1 publication in the fastener industry. You're listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
We've been talking more and more about doing business online on Fully Threaded, and one company that's doing business online with pretty good success is Jay-Cee Sales and Rivet. And with us now is Allan Weitzman. Allan, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're the general manager of Jay-Cee Sales and Rivet and also the proprietor of rivetsinstock.com. And we'd like to hear a little bit about that operation, and we'll get into some of the technology aspects of your business, but please tell us a little bit about Jay-Cee Sales.
Jay-Cee Sales is a business that was started in 1948 by my great-grandfather, and his name was Jack Clinton. And I am fourth generation in the business. We had my grandfather, Lewis Clinton, who was in it. He passed away some years ago. And we've got my father, Kerry Weitzman, and my brother, Greg Weitzman, along with my uncle, Mike Clinton, and his two sons, Jason and Brian Clinton. Jay-Cee Sales, we specialize in rivets, rivet nuts, threaded inserts, and riveting tools. And we've got about 8 million pounds of rivets in stock, filled to the top in a 40,000 square foot warehouse. So we pride ourselves on having a pretty good amount of rivets, pretty good amount of inventory, and being able to ship usually the same day.
Wow, okay.
Now, your facility is located in Farmington, Michigan, correct?
Correct. We're in Farmington, Michigan, and we ship out all over the world.
What are you seeing in the business these days? How's it going on the rivet side of the fastener industry?
The rivet side has been fairly good. 2009 was a tough year, just like for probably every company out there. But we knew it was coming. We felt it probably later than most companies, but we knew it was coming, so we adjusted our spending habits, our purchasing, and just the way we run our business. We adjusted it before we got hit with that, so we handled it pretty well. And since November 2009, we started coming back. And this year we're up about probably 30 to 35% from 2009. What we're definitely seeing is the rivet manufacturers are busier than I've ever seen them in the last 10 or 12 years. Usually when it's been a 2 to 4 week lead time, it's turning out to be a 6 to 8 week lead time. So they're definitely seeing a big push in purchasing from their customers, and hopefully it maintains. But it seems to be that the fastener industry is always the first to come back in the manufacturing, and hopefully it sustains long enough for everybody else to catch up, and we can move on and grow.
A question for you. Now, you said that the downturn hit you later than other people. Why do you think that is? I mean, do you think that's a specialty of the rivet section of the industry, or is there some other reason?
I don't know. I think that maybe that's just a benefit of being a distributor rather than a manufacturer. I think probably manufacturers feel it before distributors. And, with what we heard out in the street, we just assumed we were gonna be hit with that just like every other company. And we were, so, we were able to adjust accordingly.
Now, in our own the statistics that we keep, quite clearly there was the beginning of an uptick in November last year, and that continued. It hasn't continued on the same rate, incidentally, but it's been a bit of a seesaw up and down ride. But the low point was definitely just before November, and that sort of follows really what you were saying, that you've seen continuously improved sales since November last year.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that when times like this happen, you just have to go ahead and change your business structure accordingly. And we cut down our quantities that we purchase beforehand, and we just bought differently. And we tried to keep aggressive with our purchasing, and we were able to do that. Being a family business and having a lot of family members in the business, it's not just a job. It means something more. So, when you're doing purchasing and it's for your own business, you take the extra time, the extra effort to go ahead and get the best pricing out there. And, when times are tough, you have to be extra aggressive.
Now, just a question from me. It's sort of an interesting section of the market to concentrate on. I mean, the rivets. And we'll come back to one part of this a little bit later because it deals with the question we really were keen to ask you about your web presence. Mm-hmm. But, what type of company is using rivets and in increasing numbers?
Well, we are the largest rivet distributor, and we're able to buy in such large quantities very competitively that we're competitive actually selling to other distributors and being competitive with manufacturers. And my point being is that really probably 80% of my customer base are other distributors. So a lot of times I don't really know where the end products are ending up. We do, of course, have direct sales to OEM and other manufacturers, but, it's automotive, it's aerospace, it's industrial, it's everything. Jay-Cee Sales and Rivet is probably as diverse a company as you can possibly get. We're based out of Michigan, and probably 10 to 11% of my sales are out of Michigan.
Okay. Now, in the time that your company's been running since 1948, that's a fairly respectable length of time. Mm-hmm. Did it start off dealing with rivets only?
It actually started off as an Army surplus store. How we got into doing nuts and bolts, I think the story goes is somebody owed my grandfather some money, and he said, I don't have any money for you, but I'm sending up a barrel of rivets or something like that. And he said, I don't want it. The guy said, too bad, it's on the way. And we got it, and he sold it in a really short period of time and said, send me whatever else you have. And we got into the nuts, bolts, screws, and rivet business.
Okay.
If you ever find out that story isn't true, make sure you don't tell anyone.
Right.
Right.
But it wasn't until, I don't really know how many years ago it was, but it was probably over 30 years ago that my father said, let's get out of the nuts, bolts, and screws. It's way too competitive. Let's just concentrate on rivets. And incidentally, my brother, when he started out in the business, went to a trade show in Columbus with my father. And this gentleman came up to my brother and said, there was this company that was in the nuts, bolt, screw, and rivet business. And one day this guy, who we thought was a lunatic, said, I'm getting out of the nuts, bolts, and screws, and I'm just going to sell rivets. And the guy said to my brother, and that was the smartest thing that guy ever did, and that was your father.
Okay.
So, we got out of the nuts, bolts, and screws, and we just concentrated on rivets, and that's our forte today.
Right. I mean, there's a good thing and bad thing in that. If it takes a while, once you're established, then it's a good thing, but it's a little bit tough for a starting, I would think.
Yes.
Over the time, like all fasteners, I mean, a screw that was manufactured, in 1948 probably isn't that much different from one manufactured now. Do you see the same with rivets, or has the technology behind rivets altered in the time, even say that you've been really closely associated with it?
I think the nuts, bolts, and screws business was probably the first to be heavily manufactured and turned into a commodity overseas rather than rivets, though rivets today pretty much is the same. You still do have your specialty, blind rivets, your structural rivets, and that's I would say fairly new within the industry, probably 20, 30 years, maybe even later than that. But compared to nuts, bolts, and screws that have been around, a lot longer, there hasn't been anything specialized other than rivet nuts and threaded inserts.
Okay, we'll come back to threaded inserts. Okay, it's a subject that you and I are quite familiar with at the moment, right?
Yep.
Since you were the person who really provided the impetus for us to set to and recategorize all of our threaded inserts.
Right.
Yeah, that went about 80 hours of our lives.
Sorry.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. No one said thank you, incidentally, among any of the other people. It was like a big yawn.
Listeners can refer to episode 9 for an update on that.
Right. This is true. However, I sleep better at nights knowing that our system is a little more logical, though I've still got one problem with, I guess, the so-called push-in inserts, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, really, those are those ones I don't know. The only ones I really know about are the rivet nuts and, the standard threaded inserts. Other than that, you know them just as well as I do.
I would not think so. But the rivet nuts is sort of an interesting thing because it's a wartime patent that was taken out, isn't it? That's why it's still really owned by B.F. Goodrich, of all things, isn't it?
Well, there's a bunch of copycats out there. It's very competitive. You've got AVK, who was a manufacturer out of California, but other than that, you got a couple of other large distributors with rivet nuts. You have a lot of companies making them overseas, but there's definitely quality issues, and it's very difficult to go ahead and find a good source overseas that is actually making them.
Right. Well, that's an interesting comment. Okay. One of the other interesting things from my point of view, which you can probably provide some good insight on, is that, in the world of our other fasteners, now we go back to the metrics, there are very, very well-established standards. The standards for all sorts of types of socket bolts, and I'm thinking of the DIN and ISO standards for a start. In the world of rivets, that's not really the case. There's very few standards that govern rivets. Why do you think that is?
Boy, that's a good question, and you're putting me on the spot because, I don't really have a good answer. We follow specs to ISI standards, which basically says if the diameter is this, it needs to be within this range of 0.010 inches. The head should be this diameter, the head thickness should be this. Other than that, it's a rivet can also be very customizable. It can be 430 stainless steel, it can be a 302, 304 stainless steel, it can be a Type 316. There's so many different grades of steel. There's even more grades of aluminum. So I think that's one of the benefits of using a rivet is that you can go ahead and get a bunch of different variables to make the part that works for your application.
I mean, I'm sure you're right. It just has interested me when I went through looking at the all the standards we have and then realized how few standards cover the whole field of rivets. It really is quite strange. But what you're saying is right. It's since they're so customizable and usually are, the standards are only really pretty general ones.
Correct. You have the solid and semi-tubulars. The length is endless. You can get any length you want, and it needs to be pretty specific to work in the application. It's not like you can go ahead and take a 2-inch rivet into a 1/4-inch thick material and rivet it. It won't work. If you had a nut and a bolt, yeah, you could go ahead and fasten that with a 2-inch bolt on a 1/4-inch thickness. You would just have a lot of material sticking out on the back end. That just wouldn't work with rivets.
Yeah. Okay. Now, rivets themselves have been around for a long time, but the rivet nut, let's use its correct word, so that was actually developed to solve a problem that no one could solve. It was fitting a rubber, leading edge to a wing, I think, on planes during the war, and in the Second World War, sorry. And Goodrich developed this thing that would allow them to drill a hole through on an aeroplane that had already been built and fix something, and had to pass all the airworthiness tests. But it was a really amazing sort of a invention to solve a very difficult problem during the Second World War.
Let's turn the subject now, if we could, a little bit, and talk about the technology that you're using to drive the business and the website, rivetsinstock.com. You're a pretty aggressive web marketer, aren't you?
Yeah, we put a lot of time, effort, and money into our marketing, especially the Rivets in Stock website. We know firsthand what it takes to keep the site up on top of the organic listings or the natural listings, so you come up in front, and that's always changing. The search engines are always changing their algorithms. And,
Tell us.
Yeah, trying to keep up with it. It's a big challenge, but we have good people that really know and keep on top of that for us. Most companies would balk at the price that you have to pay for it, but we see it worth the while.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you've made it a pretty important part of your business too. So you have to pay a lot of attention to little postings that come flying out, like when Google says that we're going to look at changing the ranking of a site based on how quickly it loads, not necessarily on how relevant it is.
Google doesn't tell you anything. You really got to look for it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
that's really the key issue to it. But also, it's content driven, and we have a lot of helpful, useful content on our website.
Right.
And that's just been added on year after year after year, and we continue to add on to it and try to improve. That site is never left alone for more than a couple days. There's always been changes made on it, and we'll continue to do so. We did also add rivetsonline.com about 4 months ago, and that's our new online store, so companies can go ahead and purchase online. It's basically designed for the smaller user, and you can build your products the way you want, and it'll allow you to build a product that's in stock. And it's been going okay for us. We still have a lot of items to add to it. We still have to add solid and semi-tubular rivets, which is a huge bulk of our inventory. But we've got the blind rivets and tools and some other specialty rivets on there, and it's going pretty well.
How long have you been operating that part of the business?
To build it, it took probably about 6 months to build up until we went live, and then it's been around for probably 3 to 4 months with the products that are on there now. And it's a huge undertaking to go ahead and build a site like this, time and money. So, we wanted to do it right, and we're definitely taking our time. But it's been very successful. We were definitely concerned that we would start seeing a lot of returns because customers weren't talking to us, and maybe they thought they were buying the correct item, but they weren't.
Correct.
But we really haven't seen too many returns, which means that we built it the right way, and they're finding it easy to figure out what they need.
Now, do you see the market increasing on the web for sales of rivets? Because, say, 2 years ago, in our measuring, that was fairly small number of the searches were to do with rivets.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that it's all going to the web. Thomas Register is a perfect example. They were huge. You'd go ahead, and if you bought the books, you'd get like 15 or 20 books. And, even in college, they'd go ahead in a distribution and manufacturing course. They would show you how to use the Thomas Register books. That went way down, and now Thomas doesn't even offer the books. It's all, online via the web. So definitely, I think when most people are searching, they're definitely going to their favorite search engine, and they're typing in what they want, and whoever comes up is going to win.
In my view, one of the things that is altering the use of the web as a search place for fasteners is really some of the turnover possibly in the fastener industry itself. What we see is as younger people come into the industry, those people are much happier searching on the web for their fasteners. They know, for instance, they buy their pizzas on the web. Why don't they buy fasteners there? And it's a question that isn't even asked by some of the older people. Many of the calls that we get particularly from OEMs and manufacturers for extra help is from younger people who would consider it perfectly logical that you'd use the web.
Absolutely. Even the way catalogs are done today. We have our paper catalog that customers can email us and ask us to mail them out, however many they want. But it's also available for download. It's just a matter of who you're dealing with and what their preference is. Some people want it on their computer, and other people want to be able to turn the pages. It's
right.
Just a matter of preference.
The fact that you've put your new online site up and you're not getting the returns that you thought you might get is really a sign that the people using it are a little more educated and are getting to the information that they need on your website. In other words,
yeah, I think it comes to a point too, what kind of knowledge that person has that hits your website. I think the more knowledgeable they are, maybe the more likely they are to purchase online, whereas, that person that's unsure of themselves would absolutely rather talk to a human being. And I think that's really what we find, too, is the more technical savvy as far as fasteners or rivets that they will, go ahead and buy online.
Well, what percentage would you estimate are current customers of yours who are repeat buying and are just using the site as an order mechanism versus new customers who aren't familiar with you and they're coming to you for the first time?
Well, that's a good question, but I'm not sure I can give you a fair answer because you got to remember that rivetsonline.com isn't set up yet to sell the solid and semi-tubular rivets. Solid and semi-tubular rivets are probably 60% of my business.
Oh, okay. So you're still in a specialized market then?
Yes. The solid aluminum rivets, those should hopefully be up and running by, I would hope by the 15th of this month. And then after that, we'll move on to the other solid rivets and, the brass, the steel, the stainless steel, copper, Bonnell, Inconel. And then once we get a handle on that, we'll go ahead and add our semi-tubular rivets.
So what's involved in the process of adding a whole other product category to the website? Is it simply a matter of formatting the data? Is that it?
Well, the way we have it set up is if you went and searched for an aluminum rivet, you have fields to go ahead and they'll have drop-down menus. So you can go ahead and you can do this in any particular order. You're going to have to go ahead and, for an aluminum rivet, choose the body diameter. And from the body diameter that you choose, it'll list all the lengths available. So you can choose your length, and then you choose the head style that you want. And once you choose the head style, then it'll tell you what kind of aluminum is available under that part, whether it be a soft aluminum or a hard aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
If you needed the hard aluminum and it's not available in that head style, maybe you'll choose the hard aluminum first, and then you can see other head styles that are available. So it's really just building a matrix, and then, of course, you have to add the pricing and the weights so the system can figure out the shipping costs. So
right.
It's quite an undertaking.
Now, how many SKUs are you looking at?
10,000 plus.
Wow. Now, the inventory that you have listed with Fasteners Clearinghouse, that is all surplus, or how are you using FCH in your marketing mix?
No, we loaded up everything that was stock item. So, we made it just another search tool for customers to find us. We put the normal stuff up there. I don't have a lot of what I would consider surplus rivets, just because, we're a rivet distributor. There's nothing out of the ordinary for us to carry. So, it's a rivet. It's not going to spoil.
Right. Do you have the same problem that, say, other master distributors have, whereby items that you once had listed no longer are being bought by people, and hence they become slow-moving or rare, and they get taken out of your sales book?
No, I wouldn't say that so much for rivets. I would say more for tools.
Okay.
Tools are always being updated and tweaked to make them more efficient. That's probably the biggest change that we've seen, and we've actually gone ahead and just made an insert page for tools to put in our catalog, because those tools are always changing.
Okay, right.
Now, here's a real geek question for you. Maybe you've been in business long enough online to have an answer to this. Do you see any competition to Google from the search engine Bing?
Good question. I don't think so.
They're not on the radar yet, are they?
I think what drives people to Google is the other products that they add to it. You can set up your Google as just your home page and customize it. People will have more Gmail accounts than Yahoo accounts, because Gmail or Google was the first to give you unlimited storage for your email. So I think somebody over at Google is doing something right.
And Google has a great app for the iPhone too. I mean, in terms of a very specialized search, it's optimized just for the size of this iPhone screen, and you can talk into it, and it's very good at recognizing talking, so that you can just ask it a question and it'll go searching for it.
Oh yeah, Google, they're definitely out there to be the first to do some things, and they do it extremely well.
So just say a year ago, how did you deal with trying to split your priorities between, say, Yahoo and Google? Or did you consider even then that Yahoo was in its, the sun was setting on it?
No, I put just as much time into both of them.
Yeah?
I really do. Yeah. Just because Google is going to make up, probably 70% of the search market out there, there's still a lot of business to be had on Yahoo and MSN, or now with Bing. But we go ahead and I tweak those websites for both those all the time.
Right. We always had problems with Yahoo, but Bing actually is more friendly to generated websites like ours and yours than Google is actually, but not a lot of people use it still.
Yeah, I think, some of them pay more attention to what's on your homepage. Some of them pay more attention to the words that are in your domain name. And others, they're looking for content and links and other little trade secrets.
Well, you're right. That's getting to be a little bit inside baseball, and we're not going to ask you for all your secrets.
Thank you.
And I don't think you'd tell us either, would you?
No, probably not.
But we're going to be keeping our eye on rivetsinstock.com, because we've seen it climb through the search engine rankings, and we see it pop up all the time, and so you're doing something right, and I know others are going to be watching what you're doing too.
Yeah, we'll definitely be keeping at it.
And you can count on fastenersclearinghouse.com being right up there near the top, although I don't know that we're necessarily going to be competing with you in the rivet space. You're doing a pretty good job in that department.
Thank you.
Well, Allan Weitzman, you are the general manager of Jay-Cee Sales and Rivet, and you're in Farmington, Michigan. We've had a real good time talking with you, and we've learned a lot. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
I appreciate you guys having me on.
It's our pleasure, mate.
Donnell of Scanwell coming up next.
This is Sue Rice with the FCH team. It's my job to make sure that as an FCH member, you receive the highest possible benefit from your participation in the network. Did you know that once you're logged into FCH, you have access to exclusive search tools, site statistics, and tracking information about your inventory and source finder inquiries? It's all just a click away, and I'm happy to walk you through it. If it's time to refresh your inventory, don't worry. We'll run your listings through our scrubber software and get you up and running in a very short time. If you can attach a spreadsheet to an email, you can list inventory on FCH. We can also show you how to optimize your listings to attract the most hits for your type of fastener. Send email to Sue at fastenersclearinghouse.com and let me help you get the most from the FCH sourcing network. I look forward to hearing from you soon.
This is Rick Porter with Mid-Valley Distributors, the largest stocking distributor of fasteners in Central California. If we don't have it, weld it. You're listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
We speak about importing fasteners frequently here on Fully Threaded. And of course, one of the central issues related to that is freight and actually getting the fasteners into the country. Scanwell Logistics is a global freight and logistics company, and Chris Donnell is a national strategic partnership manager for Scanwell. Chris joins us now. Welcome to Fully Threaded Radio.
Oh, thank you very much.
We became acquainted through your rep, Brian Johnson, who was giving a presentation at a recent Midwest Fastener Association meeting. And I hope you'll be able to give us a snapshot about what's going on currently in the world of logistics and freight. But before we get into that, could you please give us a little bit of an introduction to Scanwell Logistics?
Well, Scanwell Logistics by itself is a premier logistics company specializing in supply chain management. The team that I head up focused primarily on the logistics or transportation of fasteners on a global basis into North America.
And you operate out of the Chicago regional office, is that right?
I do.
And what's your background in the logistics industry? How did you come to Scanwell?
Well, I've got about 17 years in logistics experience. Really, how I got pulled into the fastener market, or the fastener industry for that matter, was a company by the name of Fastenal, and we assisted them in broadening their scope of services and network throughout the Pacific Rim. And 7 years, actually from this month, the rest is history. And now we handle a multitude of companies from the small mom-and-pop shops to your very large distributors.
Okay, yeah, we're involved with, we've just started to get involved with Fastenal ourselves, actually.
It's a great company.
That's what we think too.
So in other words, you're dealing with numerous fastener companies that are directly importing themselves, is that true?
Yeah, we do. And we also, work with the export market as well, because that seems to be growing and favorable for especially with the U.S. dollar down the way it is during this economic crisis.
Is that the export market relative to fasteners or to other commodities?
The export market for fasteners in itself is thriving. We're seeing a lot more opportunities going into the European market and things of that nature, especially for your manufacturers that where the European market is trying to get away from some anti-dumping issues. They're looking to buy from other countries such as the United States.
So have you seen a reasonable pickup in that, probably over the last 6 months, I would think, since the anti-dumping stuff came in?
We have, and in discussions with these other companies, and what's really driving it is the fluctuation in the U.S. dollar.
Yeah. Now, do you see that specific to any particular country in Europe, let's say Germany or United Kingdom, or is it just, to you, is Europe just a big area, region?
Well, we're seeing going into Germany. We're also seeing going into France. Some product going into Switzerland. UK has always, imported that product. So, I mean, Europe as a general, we're seeing an increase.
That's interesting and good.
I guess you would be in the catbird seat, so to speak, to observe some of the effects of the anti-dumping legislation that is implemented or even threatened. Do you normally see kind of shifts happening even when there's a whisper of anti-dumping?
Oh, you do. I mean, it started, we'll go back to when threaded rod was hit with anti-dumping. You saw that transition from China, now being buyers buying from places like Thailand and Malaysia, and then obviously the Middle East, trying to avoid that. I mean, no one really wants to pay a 200% anti-dumping duty on top of what the cost of the product is.
Right.
Obviously China is our largest trading partner. I guess 19% of all our imports come from China, and you do a lot of shipping from there, or you oversee it. One of the big topics of conversation with regard to importing lately has been these tremendous lead times that have been required, and there's been a big bottleneck with imports from China. In fact, some people have even regarded it as kind of a stalled out situation. Can you speak on that? What's going on here?
With the credit crisis that's taken place for the past 2 years, a lot of the steamship lines had stalled a lot of their vessels, and what that did was it created a massive space allocation issue. So there was just so much space on a vessel that could move product. The fastener industry actually has several issues in itself with regards to the product being very heavy, very dense, and so really the only containers that are used within the industry are your 20-foot equivalent units. The issue with that is because they're so heavy and dense that ocean carriers prefer not to move that type of cargo. So what happens is it has created a shortage, per se, of product coming into the United States, and that demand of getting product moved has caused the ocean prices to go sky high. We have seen over the past year and a half prices climb upwards of 60% versus 2 years ago. So the importer today is paying significantly more than he was 2 years ago for the same product. With that being said, the space being an issue, the carriers are preferring to move more lighter, more fluff cargo, if you will. And that's caused issues with 20-foot containers and the total number of spaces or spaces allocated on a vessel. So what you're seeing is a lot of importers today are seeing products being rolled over and products being stuck at ports such as Shanghai or Shenzhen, and they're stuck there for weeks on end. And then the problem being with that is there's the cost of of warehousing product and storing product, and then when it gets here, a lot of this product is already pre-sold. So the clients or the importers are really subject to, they have to pay those high costs just to move the product. In turn, those high products from the distributor going to your local shops or your smaller distributors, the problem being is those higher ocean costs and transportation costs are reflected in the product costs that these larger distributors are selling to their end user. So really anybody that's dealing within the fastener industry is affected somehow by this crunch that's happening over in China. The good thing is the market is changing. Space is opening up. Today, the only areas that are really greatly affected by the space issue is probably your southern China ports such as Guangzhou and Shenzhen. But per my experience within the industry, those ports are less demand for the fastener product. A lot of your fastener companies are centered around the Ningbo, Shanghai area, and right now that market seems to be moving relatively smooth.
So then does that mean say if you're looking at a couple of containers sitting on the dock over in China, and one's a set of TV sets for the United States and the other one's a big set of fasteners, is it then that the company prefers to take the TV sets because they can make more money from a lighter weight?
Correct. Okay. The heavier the weight of the product, you can only put so much weight onto a vessel before it becomes a hazard, whether it be a tipping issue or so forth.
Okay.
Also understand that a 20-foot container is equivalent to 80% of a 40-foot container. So if you're placing more 20-foot containers onto a vessel, you're limiting the amount of actual cargo you can put on there. So your higher revenued products such as televisions, electronics, things of that nature sit. And unfortunately, it works reverse. The carriers want to move the lighter stuff so they can put more on their vessel and make more money.
Right. So how do you see an end to that? I mean, if all of the things being equal, then that would indicate that as long as Americans keep buying Chinese TV sets, nuts and bolts and all the other fasteners are going to be sort of hard to get here. It's not going to be any desire at all, is there?
Well, the importers have suffered. I mean, they really have, and I think that, the voices that they gave to their congressmen and to the FMC, and also if they signed directly with the ocean carriers, their voices have been heard. Really, the crunch was caused by, or the space issue was caused by our economic troubles that we're having over here, as well as what China's going through, and the simple fact that a lot of people let their inventories run out, and so what was happening is they just push all of these new orders to the manufacturer, and the manufacturer was producing as fast as they possibly could, but at that point, with everyone doing that, it created a backlog of product coming in. And it's not just for fasteners, it was the televisions, electronics, and so forth.
Right.
At one point, the Port of Shanghai was working at 140% capacity, meaning, containers were sitting there for weeks and weeks and weeks without any type of movement. And to top it off, the ocean carriers over the past year and a half have lost $20 billion, and they're looking to recoup that money, some way. So they're going to manipulate the cost to their advantage. They're going to take advantage of the situation, but at the same time, they're going to maximize each sailing by moving the most profitable cargo. And unfortunately, with the low margins within the fastener industry, it just wasn't the fasteners.
Wow, well, that's an interesting take on the whole thing.
Now, we've heard a lot about the slow steaming, and that's mainly a fuel-saving measure, is that right?
It is. A lot of the ocean carriers are trying to push the sustainability, the green issue, and so they are moving slower than normal or years past. Okay, and that's obviously saving on fuel. It's releasing less carbon emissions into the atmosphere. So it has its positives and its negatives, and you just have to weigh that out.
We should note that the fuel burnt by the big cargo ships is probably the most dirtiest of any of the fuels produced in the world anywhere. Correct. Since they're out in the sea, no one cares that much except when they come near a port.
Correct.
Yeah, you'd have to convince me that the environmental impact of this is really what's driving it, but nevertheless, I guess it's good press. I'm curious, though, what's the typical duration of a shipment across from China to, say, L.A., and what is it versus a slow steaming time?
In good operating times, it was probably 9 to about 11 days. Now you're talking, from say Hong Kong to Chicago, you're talking 11 to 13 days. So the difference really isn't that significant. I think the importers are looking at this a little differently. They're looking at this as I'm paying more money, but I'm getting my product slower. And again, you have to look at the good and the bad. Yes, ultimately, the ocean carrier, wants to move your product as efficiently as possible, but at the same time, they have to do it economically. But at the end of the day, the importer is still stuck with a 13-day transit time.
Right. But now, if the industry has got to recoup $20 billion worth of losses, then clearly the easiest way of doing it is just to stick all sorts of extra costs onto the shipments across here to recover that in a hurry. However, the reality is at some stage that makes product that's actually manufactured in the US much more desirable because it doesn't have these extra surcharges on it.
You raise a great point, and this year the ocean carriers have imposed two different peak season surcharges. They imposed the general rate increase. They've raised fuel costs, but at the end of the day, I still think when you're comparing costs across the board, trying to narrow down, get everything down to your true landed cost, I think imports still are slightly lower than if the manufacturer were to start today.
Well, that'll get some mixed reactions from our audience.
Right.
I'm just calling like I see it.
Oh, that's true, and that's as exactly why we're talking to you. But it does raise an interesting point. At some stage, if you were an importer and you kept raising your prices, you would actually drive away the very market you're trying to make money out of.
Oh, I certainly agree, and but what we've seen is not so much where manufacturing here in the States is increased. We're actually seeing a shift in business to different countries where it's actually cheaper to bring product in. We're seeing a lot more opportunities coming out of South Africa, Dubai, where I can move a container from, as example, Dubai for about $1,500 to $2,000 less than I can bring it from Shanghai to Chicago. So we're seeing that transition where importers are now looking at different countries to manufacture their products.
Let me get back to that comment you made about increasing the efficiency. Back at the MWFA meeting a couple of months ago where we were talking with Brian Johnson, he showed a slide of this huge fleet of empty cargo vessels. I think it was off the port of Singapore. And I'm not sure exactly what that was telling us, but can you elucidate on that and tell us how does it fit in with what's happening in today's market?
Certainly. Actually, there's a great article, if you're more than welcome to Google, it's called The Ghost Fleet. Essentially what happened is as this economic crunch started, carriers were losing massive amounts of money due to these fleets that were just sitting idle. And they were moving, container ships from China to the U.S. at 10% capacity. The unfortunate thing is when you're moving a boat at 10% capacity, it's still going to cost you the same amount as if you were moving it at 100% capacity. So with that being said, the vast majority of ocean carriers out there basically moved a large percentage of their fleet and sat it idle off the coast of Singapore. I think at one point it was the second largest fleet of vessels anywhere in the world. It was actually the only fleet that was larger was the United States Armed Forces. So I mean it was I think at one point there was well over 700 vessels that were sitting idle off the coast of Singapore.
I'm actually looking at the article now. The one you're referring to, I believe, is the one from the New Republic, and it was written by Christopher Orr.
Yes.
Okay, then another follow-up question to that same presentation. What's happening with the piracy that was taking place all across North Africa several months ago? Is that still an issue?
It is an issue, and actually the issue of piracy has been around since the 1800s, and it's happened. As an example, I was in Singapore 4 years ago, and there was 3 vessels that were commandeered that were in the Malacca Straits. So piracy has been around for many, many years, and the issue of piracy really, the pirates aren't really looking at the cargo as valuable as the people that are on it, but there has been instances where pirates have commandeered the vessel and stolen the product that's on there. Our government, most of the countries that are now taking drastic measures and making sure that their armed forces are patrolling the waters, their waters. The problem being is when you get into free open waters, you do run the risk, no matter where you are in the world, of piracy.
Except some places are a little bit more likely to be subject to that than others. So who does
definitely.
the policing in the area around the Malacca Straits then? I mean,
the Singapore and actually every country down from Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, they all have their own patrols that monitor their waters for piracy. And again, I mean, these are things that you can go on and Google and see. The Malacca Straits are one area that's seen a lot of piracy. Obviously, off the coast of Somalia and Madagascar, you've got issues. But really, piracy has happened in the Caribbean, so it can happen anywhere.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's talk a little bit about going forward. We had some guests on Fully Threaded recently that were describing really long lead times and a lot of stalls happening. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what would you expect to see going forward if you could make any predictions?
I'll give it my best shot. We are seeing space becoming more abundant. Right now, we're looking at markets that produce and manufacture and distribute a lot of the fasteners to places like North America, places like Singapore, or Shanghai, Ningbo, Xinjiang, Qingdao. These are all places where a vast majority of the product comes from, and we're seeing space open up. So I think that lead time is going to certainly come down, as well as the cost. I think we're set to start seeing some drastic improvements in cost because space is no longer an issue, so the carriers can't use that issue as a crutch to increase costs. Going into fourth quarter to the first quarter of 2011, I think really depending on the distributors or the importers' inventory, I think you're going to start seeing cost come back down to 2008, 2007 levels. We're starting to see new carriers come on board, some smaller carriers that are taking some of the space away from your large ocean carriers, which again will benefit the importer. We're also seeing a shift from the China market into other lesser congested markets, which has allowed some of these China ports to open up a little bit more. In general, I think we're going to start stabilizing. My only reserve on that is if we continue within this financial crisis that we're in, or if matters were to get worse, I think what would happen is the carriers would again start pulling out their ships from their sailings and cause the rates to further increase. But I don't see that happening at least until the first or second quarter of 2011.
I was surprised that you didn't mention fuel costs in that assessment, and I suppose that all of that is based on the assumption that there aren't any major shifts in fuel costs.
No, and we're actually seeing a decrease in fuel, which we haven't seen in the past 18 months, which is surprising because typically during the summer, the fuel is at its highest, and we're starting to see that decrease. Actually, we just got a $50 decrease per TEU based on the fact that the fuel costs are going down.
Do you understand why that might be happening?
I don't. With the BP issue in the Gulf, things of that nature, you would think that fuel costs would either remain the same or go slightly up. But up to this point, we haven't seen any increase in fuel since the first quarter of 2010. Now you would think that the prices would stabilize and maintain for at least the next quarter, but they are decreasing, so the importers can now start to expect to see their invoicing from whoever they're using to start decreasing as well.
Well, let's see if we can't bring something into the conversation that our listeners can put to use. Is there any one issue or a big mistake, perhaps, that you see importers making? Or from your perspective, is there something they could do to improve the way they operate?
There's several things that I see that have oftentimes concerned me with regards to importers. The relationships that they have with their suppliers, I think, are vital. Suppliers are an extension of the importer here. And oftentimes the importers are too busy worried about the total landed costs and reducing cost, whereas just by strengthening the relationship that they have with the supplier, that in turn has an opportunity to reduce costs, obviously make the whole process more efficient. So that's always been a thing that I've always focused in on is developing better client relationships, both with the supplier and the importer. Another thing is understanding the local cultures. A lot of people who are now vested veterans into importing or those that are new really haven't taken the time to understand the local cultures. So a lot of times there's a lot of hiccups or miscommunications, which, whether they were intended or not, they happen. Obviously, an importer today needs to have multiple options because of the market's instability. Relying on one source it will only bring hardship, and you have to have your options open, both on a supplier level as well as a logistics company.
Are you and Scanwell Logistics in a position to help your customers to do these things, Chris?
Certainly. Scanwell being a large company on a global basis, we have 80 offices worldwide. Part of our mandate internally is to make sure that not only are the best interests of the importer being done, but we're also looking at the best interests of the supplier. Being a true logistics company, we're looking at always or any way to improve efficiencies, both internally and externally. And as we assist in the development of supplier relationships. We've seen through various case studies where we have documented where we've looked at rewarding the supplier for doing certain items, and it's paid off, and the relationships have grown between the supplier and the importer. Efficiencies have improved. Also, the lead times have been reduced, even during good economic times. So these are things that we're doing on a daily basis. And actually, throughout the Pacific Rim, Scanwell is very well known for doing that. We're also open to conducting searches for our clients. If we're not the best option for a client, then we will certainly recommend one that would best their needs.
Okay.
Listeners can access additional information about Scanwell Logistics at their website, www.scanwell.com.
Certainly.
It's worth mentioning again the article that you referenced a few minutes ago. It's called The Ghost Fleet, and it was a fascinating story. I remember reading it at the time, but it's a snapshot of what was going on about a year ago this time, and it's an article that was in the New Republic written by Christopher Orr, September 14th, 2009 edition. Well, Chris Donnell, you are the National Strategic Partnership Manager for Scanwell Logistics, and we really appreciate you joining us. I learned a lot.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
My pleasure anytime, and if there's anything else I can do, please feel free to ask.
Stick around for more Fully Threaded.
fastener-related.com. Search and source from over 500,000 line items, all just a mouse click away and available at no charge. When the need arises, you won't find a better place to locate hard-to-find fastener inventory. It's where you need to be.
This is Joe Truckee of Cal Fasteners, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for us.
This is Robert Wanzer, and Fasteners Clearinghouse works for American Imperial.
This is Andy Pell from ScrewCrew.com, and FCH works for the fastener industry.
Join the sourcing network now and show your inventory to a whole new market. Turn slow movers into cash. List up to 10,000 line items. Show them to distributors only or to the world. fastenersclearinghouse.com. It's where you need to be.
Hi, this is Hugh Hewitt for the Injured Marine Semper Fi Fund, www.semperfifund.org. Over the past 7 years, twice a year, the wonderful people who operate the Semper Fi Fund and many amazing Marines who have been the beneficiaries of the charities that have supported the Semper Fi Fund, including many thousands of individual donors, have come into my radio studio to tell their amazing stories of serving their country, of being wounded, and how the Semper Fi Fund has helped them make that transition back to recovery. Unfortunately, Bethesda and Walter Reed are full again. More and more men and women are coming back from the war injured, sometimes awfully so. We need the Semper Fi Fund to be there for these Marines and those soldiers, sailors, and airmen who served alongside of them. Please consider a gift to the Semper Fi Fund. Very low overhead, extraordinary capacity to get money where it needs to get in a hurry, and great management, including some of the senior Marines who've ever served under the flag. When you're looking for something to do that will make an impact, please check out the Semper Fi Fund. That's www.semperfifund.org, www.semperfifund.org.
This is Greg Wiener with Quick Screws International, where we say if it's wood, it must be good, and you're listening to Fully Threaded Radio.
Brian and Eric, back with you on Fully Threaded. You know, it was interesting talking with Chris Donnell of Scanwell. It's a subject that I don't know a heck of a lot about, but I'll tell you one thing. The whole idea of piracy, it really kind of enamors me. I don't know why.
Right, and we dealt with this in one of our really early issues, the connection between piracy and the early America. So we'll leave that there, okay? It just happens to exist, and it's a problem.
Right, that's true. But importers, I guess, are going to find good news in what he had to say. That is, as long as importing costs remain stable or even possibly decrease in the coming quarter or two.
Right, and from a Chris was saying, there should be a decrease because there's enough competition between some of the new freight companies. I guess other things that would be sort of good news is some of the reports about Fastenal that are coming out.
Right. We mentioned that with Holden Lewis at the opening of the show, and there was a story that came out about a week back. Headline was Fastenal's Oberton, OEM inventory, a thing of the past, and I'm sure you can easily Google that, but they were mentioning that the results for Fastenal in the second quarter were actually very, very favorable, and in fact that they had grown over last year by 29.8%. So that's good news, I think, for the industry as a whole, not just Fastenal.
Right. But, the problem is, as you know from all the people that you talk to, some of these analysts or the analysis we get, it's all over the board. I mean, we talk to some people who see real profound activity in this last month, and we see others who are still waiting for the phone to ring. There does not seem to be a proper pattern to it all, but the people, I talked to some people, a company yesterday actually, and they were telling me that this last month is the best month they've had in years, and that is not consistent with some of the people that you talk to.
Well, this is what we've been seeing for the last several quarters, so I think that's the established pattern is there is no pattern. But what we do know is things seem to be picking up, and we can only hope that they're sustained. In the discussion with Holden Lewis, he did acknowledge the kind of the skepticism that's out there, and really we have no other choice. So let's take what we can get and be optimistic in some of these more positive reports that we're seeing.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's true. I mean, I want them to be positive.
And also on the next show, episode 12, we're going to be talking with Gary Polipnik, and he's the regional manager for Fastenal for the North Central region. I'm really looking forward to that conversation.
And Gary, yeah, right, he's been the person behind the move to allow Fastenal to use Fasteners Clearinghouse as one of the means of actually liquidating some of their slow-moving inventory, the non-contributing inventory.
Yeah, and we'll cover that and a couple of other subjects when we talk with him during the next episode. Also, I mentioned that in episode 12, we're going to be talking with Rob Lucas, and he's now the sole partner of Fidelis Fasteners and also the partner of Global Fastener Network, along with Mike McGuire. So we'll get some of the details on that, and I'm really looking forward to that one as well.
Okay.
Guess we'll take a moment to thank all of the guests of episode 11, and they were Allan Weitzman of Jay-Cee Sales and Rivet, Chris Donnell of Scanwell Logistics, and, of course, Holden Lewis, our analyst from BB&T Capital Markets.
Yes, I'd like to thank them all, too.
And we'll also remind you that you can communicate with us at the email address ftr@fullythreaded.com. Look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, and just so you know that you can subscribe to the podcast using the link on the right-hand side of the page. Click on that little iTunes picture, and that will start up iTunes on your own PC and subscribe you to it. Some people do that, and some people even do their gardening to it, so we know now.
That's right. It's a phenomenon of the modern era that you can be out in your garden or you can be on the treadmill at the gym and you can be enjoying Fully Threaded Radio and learning more about the industry. Isn't it great?
Right. That's right. Now, I know from just thinking back to last episode we had when we were talking to Dr. Lusher, and he was discussing some of the work he's doing on fasteners into some of the new composite materials. I see a report that Ferrari's having a problem with this. It's at this very moment.
Right. I saw this.
Well, it relates to their a beautiful car, actually. It's a great pity, the Ferrari Italia 458. And apparently one of the heat shields that sits over the exhaust pipes. Now, on a V12, you have fairly big sets of exhaust pipes, I might say. One of these heat shields bends a bit and gets a bit close to the exhaust pipes, and the heat shields themselves are composites, and the epoxy holding them together starts to catch on fire.
Right. There was a headline on this on Global Fastener News I saw. Is that where you saw it?
Yeah, actually, no, I didn't see it there, but I saw it somewhere else, but I went back and saw it there. I mean, the great pity is, of course, the car costs $250,000 in the US. I saw it. I know. I saw a report of a young lady who had bought one of these in Russia. The price in Russia is much more. Here's $850,000.
Oh, brother.
And within 30 minutes of owning it, on her way home, the car had caught fire and burnt to a complete set of ashes. Now, there's another report of one of these burning in China. Who knows? Maybe you got caught in that traffic jam we were talking about last episode.
Oh, no. I guess here in the States, what they call, at least in the local area, they call that a carbecue.
Right, yeah. No calling out for Chinese takeouts on that one, okay?
Not at all.
But it's just sort of a really difficult problem, and it's not, the history is that most cars made out of these new composite materials, be they Ferraris or Lamborghinis or all the expensive hand-built cars, have all had problems at one time or another with burning, because they burn, and they burn very, very well. So I guess Ferrari needs to do a bit of work, and not only work in their publicity department, they need to do a bit of work in their engineering department. They work out how they redo their fasteners.
Maybe they need to make a call to Dr. Tony Lusher.
Maybe they do. We'll tell Tony to pack specially for Italy, okay, Modena.
Well, I don't know that we'll need to necessarily worry about driving Ferraris and having them light up yet, but maybe one of these days, you never know. If we sell enough screws, right?
Right, that's true.
And with that, let's consider episode 11 in the can. For Brian Musker, this is Eric Dudas. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time.
Fully Threaded Radio is a production of Fasteners Clearinghouse. Music provided by Audionautics.
I can't think of anything else to say at the moment, okay?